My name is Yusuf Chunara. I'm a professional manager within the standards department. So while we still have people busy connecting, let us quickly test the chat function. Could everyone please invited to head over to the chat function and please type in the name of your organization or firm and the area where your organization or firm is situated. Hi, Crystal. Hi. Nice I see Cape Town. We have Tiffany. Welcome. We have SABAT from Durban. We have again Cape Town. I see the chat function is working well. Hi, David. Thanks a lot. So before we begin our official program, which will be shared in a moment, let's address a few housekeeping matters. The IRBA will unfortunately, for this event, not provide CPT certificates. With regards to the recording and presentations, we are currently recording the event. The recording will be published on the IRBA website and will be announced. And this would include the slides that you may want to, which will contain useful information that you may want to refer to at a later stage. You'll note that although your mics have been muted and your cameras have been turned off, we do definitely encourage you to feel free to use Teams reactions. You know, normally as a presenter, it's always nice to have attendees acknowledge them through a smile or a thumbs up. The meeting chat, as we have just confirmed, works very well. It's able to provide a platform for interactive Q&A. What this means is that you can post your questions in the chat, and we'll either pick it up on live discussion, or alternatively, if not, the presenter will respond directly to your question in the chat. And then lastly, a reminder that the views expressed by our external presenters today are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the views of the IRBA. That takes care for now for the administrative matters. Just to note that if we have any connectivity issues, we have team members monitoring the webinar, and we will do everything we can to address these issues. So why are we here today? Attendees, today we focus on a vital segment of our auditing profession, our small and medium-sized practices, or what we call SMPs. US SMPs represent a significant portion of firms that are registered with the IRBA. You provide essential audit services that serve the public interest. Your firms work diligently for a diverse range of clients, ensuring quality in your audit processes. And importantly, you also serve as a crucial training ground for your staff and future registered auditors. We at the IRBA recognize and value the role you play and want to see your sector thrive and flourish. Nevertheless, however, there are challenges you and your teams face that are unique. In this webinar, we will cover some of these topics. We are joined by a panel of industry specialists who themselves are practitioners as well, who will provide best practices and strategies to equip each one of you in effectively managing your practices. So whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just starting out, or someone interested in the inner workings of SMPs, there's something here in this webinar for everyone. Thank you for being here today, and let's get started on this important journey of support and growth for SMPs. Have you seen on the agenda? This SMP webinar consists of 5 short sessions, which are the strategies for balancing client management with business growth. We have the IRBA inspection observation regarding audit quality at SMPs. We have a panel discussion on the best practices for recruitment and retention, tips for crafting a cutting-edge technical team, and lastly, understanding the impact of stress on practitioners and their teams. A 10-minute comfort break will be held after the third session at 2:30, with the program resuming at 3:20. Each session will be concluded with a short Q&A before going on to the next session. And the program is set then to conclude at 3:30. So that takes care of now and concludes the welcome and introductions. Over to our first presenter for the day, and that is Koen Stokes. Kun is the CEO of the Baraka Group. In 2017, he was nominated as one of the top 35 CAs under 35 by SAICA. He serves on many of the SAICA structures, which includes the SAICA National Council member and the National Small Medium Practice Committee chairperson. So Kun, welcome, and over to you to get us started off today, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate the introduction. Colleagues, it's such a privilege to be in this session today. It's also a privilege to be currently joined by 275 attendees. And just before I get to my production, apologies, Yusuf, about that. Apologies, colleagues. Thank you from my side to also allowing us.
You're on mute.
No, sorry, Yusuf. We can hear Kun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, Sadia. Thank you. So thank you, colleagues. First of all, before we get into my presentation, I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank IRBA for a specific focus that was afforded to SMPs from the middle of last year. After some discussions we had with the Stannis team, IRBA and SAICA visited more than 100 firms last year and taken a specific interest in what is the challenges that us as SMPs face. And it's also a privilege that after that, there was a few collaborations. As one example, the input that was afforded by practitioners into adoption or not adopting in South Africa the ISA for LCE, so the International Standards of Auditing for less complex entities. So there's a specific focus from IRBA. And also in today's session, we'll see what is the focus from IRBA to support us as SMPs. So from my perspective, the collaboration that we had in the last year, colleagues, if you reach out to IRBA, they will definitely support you as a practice to ensure that you have a proper quality audit product to deliver, as it also serves the public interest. And again, thank you for IRBA for allowing us this forum today. In the introduction, the question was asked, how do you manage today? Or the question was asked to me, how do you manage and how do you then plan for the future while also taking care of your clients and your business growth? And that's for me a journey. So please, next slide. If we consider the journey that we're on, we will always need to start at today. So what are we today at? We are, in whatever segment we are a small business owner. If you are an audit manager, you are the owner of that specific section in your practice. If you're a partner or an assurance provider, you are also the owner of that specific section in your business. And you must take the responsibility and the accountability for that. So if we start with today, we need to realize planning for the future. Yes, our product is that of an assurance provider or reporting on assurance, but that is not only what we need to concern ourselves about. That was to define us. Yes, auditors are always risk adverse, but unfortunately, the nature of the future that we live in South Africa is unknown, and we will need to take a bit of risk, and we'll address that also a bit later. But you must be the leader. For us to plan for the future, you must take, first of all, some honest reflection on the ecosystem that we're in. What is the challenge that we face? What is the clients that we have? Is there possible risk that we need to look at in our firm? And it also links to everything that we need to do in terms of ISQM and requirements. And that honest reflection and then action, a response to that, is where we start from today. It is unfortunately quite difficult because we have a lot of stakeholders, our teams, our clients, and external parties like SAICA, IRBA, and so forth that might influence our decisions. But we are ultimately the leader. We are a responsible person. So to start on our planning for the future, that's where we all should start, to make sure that we have an honest reflection on what we are on about. Look at our own firms, look at the challenge that we face, and that ultimately then starts with a conscious decision to own your future. As practitioners, there's so much uncertainty, but the only thing that we can take care of is our own planning for the future. What is the actions that we take? Next slide, please. If we then consider the journey that you're on, as I said, we are ultimately responsible. We are responsible to create the future for our firm, for our clients, and also for our team. If we ultimately take bad decisions today in this journey that we're on, what will be the impact if we hypothetically sign off an audit report that the ultimately audit failure, we all concern ourselves about the possible impact of what Melanie will address a bit later, Melanie will address a bit later. But we also need to remember that's a bigger impact. If we sign off an audit report, what is the impact on our other clients that might use that report for finance purposes? What might be the impact of other of our clients that might use that for tax purposes? So we are responsible for this journey, and we are responsible to create that future. So we need to plan for that. Ultimately, the considerations, we all understand technology. We are all faced daily with some challenges of artificial intelligence, new software, client needs, large data, and all of that is something that we need to consider in our planning for this future. The market that we serve in, ultimately as a S&P, from as recently as last year, we are not anymore required as S&Ps to have certain accreditation before you can sign off in the listed environment, so the JSE. So that's maybe a whole new market that we can take on as a S&P. Ultimately, what do we provide to our clients? Is it assurance services? Do we rather assist some of our clients to prepare for assurance services with other audit firms? Do we deliver internal audit? Is there review? And the likes of that. So that's all of the items that we need to consider ourselves with in terms of this journey. But then the most important one is our human capital. The moment that we employ somebody, we are also party to that individual's journey. We are also a party to support that specific individual in terms of their own growth, what is their understanding and perception of the profession. And we are ultimately, as leaders, as the owner of that little segment in your own firm, we are responsible for that. Ultimately, if we look at all of that and you plan, you can have the very best strategies and plans. You can ultimately have all of this dotted out, but unfortunately, the most important decision is to execute. Unfortunately, colleagues, we see so often that we have the plans maybe to report on a specific client. But if we do not execute, that decision still stays with us. We are the leaders, and as an example, again, some of the other presidents will also address that. But if we don't take that leadership function and we document what is our plans and how we execute, it becomes very difficult to control your journey. But once we now decide to execute, it's important to communicate. I think for most of us, we are all very uncomfortable with the unknown future. And if we are not communicating with our clients, we don't communicate with our team, it's very difficult for them to join us on this journey. If we take hands, we communicate, and then we actually walk this journey with them, it becomes so much easier to plan for the future. If we look, next slide, please. If we consider the future that we could build, I think the most important thing to concern ourselves with is a sustainable business environment. If we as practitioners, if we as practitioners are a sustainable business, the pressure that we could face in accepting some engagement that there's a possible risk, the pressure that we're under in terms of how we quote, better known as sometimes lowballing, the pressure that we're under in terms of allowing certain things at clients or pushing back, is much easier if we have a sustainable business. And that comes down to the quality in what we do. As we build this future, as we look at sustainable business, it ultimately also, if we deliver a quality product, that's our best marketing. That's how other individuals will reach out to us as practitioners and say, will you please be my auditor? Will you please be of service to us? And that again supports your sustainable business. The moment that you have a future that is based on a sustainable business, I do believe that there's less risk that you have in your practice also. Less risk that you need to take on in terms of your staff complement. You can rather employ a bit more individuals. You can recruit better. And that also comes down to what we plan for. So if we document the future, we understand the market that we're in, it's easier to grow. But that also assists us to have less reliance on some key clients. I know there's certain thresholds in the market in most ISQM manuals that require you not to be reliant on a specific client. But unfortunately, specifically in SMP, there's always a key individual, a key director, a key shareholder that's linked to 5, 10, 20 different clients. And it becomes sometimes difficult to say, sir, ma'am, no, this is not acceptable. And that also put more pressure on us as a business owner. It puts more pressure on us to take certain risks. And that's not sustainable for our future. But if you have a plan to look at how you grow your business, and it's a more sustainable business, it's easier to say, no, thank you, I'm not going to accept this. With that being said, that also then have less reliance on certain resources. We always tend in most financial environments to just have enough staff. As you grow your business, as you plan for this future, that this journey that we're on, that will also allow you to employ a bit more staff to support you in executing your specific engagements. And that ultimately will free up some time for you to enjoy your life. Why do we work? Why is it just to try and make the next payroll run? Is it just to make sure that we pay the next set of creditors? No, it's also for us to enjoy the fruits of our labor. And that's ultimately based on something that we can enjoy ourselves. Whatever is the lifestyle, may it be that you enjoy hunting or playing golf or just spend time with your family, that is what we work for. Once we as owners demonstrate that to our staff, the attractiveness of the profession should also significantly improve. Our team see us all work long hours, early mornings, late evenings, and for youngsters to become part of the profession, that's always one of the comments. But we don't want to be working so many hours as a partner. So for us to be on this journey, it's also to ensure that there's more youngsters that would like to stay in the audit profession and support us in business. So ladies and gentlemen, if I now bring the whole package, what I said from where we are today, you are the leader. You need to plan for this future that you would like to create. A future of sustainable business. A future where every assurance file that we work on is based on quality. Every assurance file that we look at, we ensure that we do not take unnecessary risks and that the public can rely on the product that we deliver. Once we take that ownership, once you have a plan for the future, it becomes much, much easier to build a sustainable business environment. Once we get to the point where we then communicate to our clients, the clients will also, in my view, my experience, respect us more. They'll be comfortable to also refer some of their friends and their colleagues to us. And yes, I'm well aware that some of us is fortunate enough that we do not have a lot of competition as SMP in the more outlying areas. But that's also its own a specific risk in that environment. And that also makes it difficult for you to, on a later stage, to sell your practice on or even to monetize what you've built over years. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion from my side, we need to plan for the future. We need to understand what is the future that we would like to build. Once we understand the future, we communicate. We give that message to the stakeholders. We then take ownership of the execution. We take ownership on how do we arrive at that specific future. And ultimately, that, in my view, would create time for all of us to make sure that we grow our business and enjoy life on what we work for. I hope that I've brought some comments that you can, therefore I know it's a very limited portion, but Yusuf, I don't see anything in the chat so far on questions, but back to you then. Yusuf, you're not muted.
Thank you, Con. From my side, I'd just like to thank you. Your enthusiasm for practice and your incitement for the work that SMPs do does make us all enthusiastic. Thank you for sharing your insights. I think your strategies will definitely help practitioners navigate today's challenges while keeping an eye on the future. I think I have two questions from my end. and that's please advise on the most essential thing to consider on this journey.
Apologies. Just give me one moment. I just want to switch to the other screen. Apologies. Give me one moment. And please just repeat the question. I just for a moment there was distracted. Apologies about that.
No problem. The first one is please advise on the most essential thing to consider on this journey.
Yes, I think the most important thing is apologies, colleagues. Just switch between the other questions. Apologies. I think that where I was starting on my journey, and it's also one of the comments that was in the chat on the how from Alexis, I've started initially to have a look at the three most important things for me, and that was resources, training of the resources, and then using technology. So ultimately, if you consider that and say, okay, what does the future look like? What is the amount of staff that we need? What is the type of clients that we would like to approach? What is our marketing? We will then understand what is our staff complement, and that resources also include the technology that I referred to. So from experience, research the market, not only South African-based software, look at some of the software that's used as best practices in the US or in Europe. Consider how that works with your firm, with your morphology as an assurance provider. Make sure that you then employ the right team. It's all about culture. It's all about getting the right staff. And we all have experiences on some of our more not so successful employees that we've employed in the past. And it might be that sometimes your better employees are a bit more expensive. Make sure that you train the team to be aligned. And once we then give them the best possible tools, allow your team to go and execute. But keep in mind, we are still as firm owners ultimately responsible for the quality of the firm, of the product we deliver. We are ultimately responsible for files. So you must still be involved. But for me, the most essential things to consider is your resources, the training to the resources, and the technology that you use.
Thank you, Kun. I think we just have a minute or two. Maybe you can just take this one quickly. Is there a future for S&P assurance firm in South Africa?
Yes, sir. Maybe I'm biased because I'm in that environment, but absolutely yes. I do believe with the lower amount of or the less RIs that's been qualified by at this point in time, and unfortunately, aging market or aging practitioners, it does create a scarcity of resources of assurance. I do understand that there is some changes coming up from CIPC in the public interest score and what is the requirements for a review or an audit. But I do believe that there's still a lot of opportunities for us in the market. There's a lot of entities that grow substantially. Even the number that's been thrown around as a new public interest score, I do believe that audit will still be a requirement for quite a lot of companies. And with the aging market, apologies if I put it so bluntly, but there's definitely going to be a scarcity of resources. And if we look at the market that we're in, ultimately, that's something that will not be replaced absolutely by AI. Yes, you can use the tools, but there will still be a warm-body auditor that will need to engage with the client, look at professional judgment, and sign a report. So my view is absolutely yes. There's definitely a future for S&P assurance firm in South Africa.
Thank you, Kun. So that brings us to the end of our first session. Our second speaker for the day is Melanie Porter. Melanie is a team leader in the Audit Inspections Department at the IRPA. She has over 10 years experience in auditing and accounting. She's a seasoned professional with a long academic and professional record. Melanie, welcome, and over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Yusuf, and good afternoon, and I hope everyone's well. So I am Melanie. I'm a team leader in the inspections department, and I'll be taking you through some of the key inspection observations that we've noted, particularly in the S&P space. So a lot of you might be familiar with the inspection roadshows that we've held during the course of this year, which was attended by many of the smaller and medium-sized firms who provided a lot of valuable input. some of which included a request for us to present findings that are more tailored to what we're observing in the S&P space. Because we do appreciate that in our public inspections report, smaller firms are included, but it's reported on an average basis. So you can't see specifically what are some of the findings coming through in the S&P space. So what we've done is then utilize this initiative from our standards department, and we've collated for you some of the key observations that we've identified in the S&P space. And please remember that this is not specific to any particular firm, but these are more the key deficiencies that we see reoccurring when we perform inspections. And we believe that the S&Ps will definitely benefit from hearing about some of these. As part of our 9th inspection cycle approach, one of our initiatives is to be more visible in the S&P space. For those of you that are not familiar with the 9th inspection cycle, inspections are performed on a cyclical basis, and every cycle lasts for or runs for a 3-year period. In each cycle, what we look at is some of the previous risks or comments coming through, and we take those and incorporate it into our current cycle. And one of the things that we noted in the previous cycle was the criticism for not being more visible in this S&P space. So although our primary mandate is to perform inspections, what we do acknowledge is that doing inspections alone will not achieve the ultimate goal of improving audit quality in South Africa and hence protecting the public. Therefore, we aim to be more visible in the S&P space, but we have questioned ourselves in terms of what does it mean to be more visible in this space? And remember, being more visible does not necessarily mean doing an actual inspection. So our approach includes things like sharing information on various platforms like the smaller firm or the smaller practitioners platforms, hosting various roadshows, and even being here today to present and talk to you and share some of the observations we believe will aid in being more visible. Because we strongly do believe that sharing and discussing observations that we note will help even those who have not yet been inspected to take note of some of these key issues and to hopefully proactively remediate this. Because remember, you don't have to wait for an inspection to be performed. You can already start remediating when you hear about some of these deficiencies that we've identified. When you look at the International Standard on Quality Management, ISQMs, even the standard talks to regulatory inspections only being a small portion of a firm's system of quality management. You would agree, and the standard also recognizes that the risk in smaller firms with no public interest clients is different to that of larger firms or firms that are smaller but do service public interest clients. So when we perform our business intelligence process, this information is taken into consideration in selecting the firms that we are going to inspect, selecting the files that we are going to inspect, because we also recognize that in a year, there's only a certain number of inspections that we can perform. So to increase visibility, we don't necessarily need to perform an inspection, but we will continue to do it via other means such as platforms like this. So as we've promised to present findings on the S&P space, what I've then done with my colleagues is collated a summary of inspection findings, observations that we've noted in the past 2 years. And remember, this will not be inclusive of all findings that we've noted, but it's the key reoccurring findings that we've listed. And again, with this, we are not intending to compare smaller firms with larger firms or compare S&Ps with each other. So please do rest assured that even in the larger firm space, we do see similar findings coming through, in addition to other types of findings. So we do follow a risk-based approach. Therefore, naturally, you would expect us to find findings. And the expectation is not going to be that when we perform an inspection, there'll be no findings. So please, I do really encourage you, please don't be disappointed or discouraged when findings are reported. Instead, I want to really encourage you today to please try and see the benefits of an inspection. When an inspection is performed, you get to learn from another reviewer's perspective. You also get insights, valuable insights into your own processes, especially at the firm level, that you wouldn't ordinarily come across. So please try and see inspections with that perspective. But on the next slide, what I've actually then started to detail, if we can go to the next slide, is then some of the key observations that we see coming through. The first one is a very common one that we see coming through. It's the assembly and the archiving of audit files. So when you look at the assembly of audit files, it's assembling a complete audit file that includes all working papers that support the audit opinion. But when we perform inspections and look at files, we don't necessarily see that evidence of a file being archived in time or a file being archived with all the working papers included. What we also tend to see is modification on the files that come through. So these are modifications that are either happening between the audit report signing date and the assembly period that's required, which is typically a 60-day period. So you'll see modifications coming through in that period. Or we also sometimes see modifications coming through a number of days post that audit report signing. So sometimes even 100 days, 140 days. So that is a key issue that we see coming through when we perform inspections in this space. The second point there is a lack of methodology or guidance. We do appreciate that, I guess, in the smaller to medium-sized firms, the extent of methodology and guidance is limited because of their own constraint, be it capacity and so forth. But what we see coming through as an issue is that when samples are selected and when testing is performed, it's not clear how the sample sizes or the samples that have been selected is a size that will reduce the risk that's associated with that particular testing to an acceptable level. So that doesn't come through. We also see an inappropriate risk assessment being done or an inappropriate evaluation of the risks that are associated with the particular line item being tested. And that does stem from a lack of a proper understanding of the client's environment or the activities that are performed within that client environment. Another common one that comes through is the information produced by the entity. So that's the typical IPE testing that's not coming through. Because we got to remember, whenever you use any information produced by the entity or provided by the client, you need to test that information for reliability in order to be able to place reliance on that for audit purposes. Journal entry testing is another popular area where we see deficiencies coming through, particularly around testing the year-end journal entries of the client. So you do need to take into consideration all the requirements in the standard and focus on testing those as required. But remember, there is key requirements like year-end journal entries that do need to get tested. Interestingly enough, we do see a lot of information technology findings that have been coming through. And I'm sure we're going to continue to see these because we are operating now in an information technology and in an IT intensive space. And a lot of clients are starting to, and even us as auditors, starting to invest and use technology at client operations, but together with audit firms to execute audits. So what we see in terms of deficiencies in this area is there's not a proper understanding of that IT environment. So you need to have that proper understanding of the IT environment in the first instance to be able to then determine, do you need to place reliance on controls? Can you actually audit around the client system? Remember, some client systems are so highly IT dependent, like your cryptocurrency type of clients. Those are so highly IT intensive that can you actually perform an audit without actually auditing those IT environments, without understanding it and then placing reliance on the controls that are coming through? And when you look at the type of controls that you need to be considering, remember, your IT general controls are important. It's more important when you actually want to test application controls or IT dependent controls that are then linked to that IT general controls. IPE considerations. Remember, when you're in an IT highly intensified IT environment, or even in your basic IT environments, you need to consider your IPE. So that's the information being produced by those systems. Can you place reliance on that information without you having tested that system? You can't just extract a listing and then place reliance on it, especially if you haven't tested that system and the ITGCs around those. Also, when you look at audit work being performed around FSLIs, which is your financial statement line items, you need to consider how dependent are those line items on that IT environment. If we move on to the next slide, we look at deficiencies being raised in the areas of execution of significant auditor judgment. Now, remember, with auditor judgment, this is not just a documentation point. You can't just document your auditor judgment in isolation. Your judgments being applied needs to come through in the documentation of the audit work that you are performing on that particular section. So, for example, if you are testing accounting estimates, which can include your fair value measurements, the revaluation of your assets, you need to look at what are you assessing and what judgments are you applying, and you need to document that rationale when you are performing those inspections. Because remember, the documentation of professional judgment is required to demonstrate the reason why something is being done. The extent of your testing, it talks to the risk that you're trying to address versus the extent of what you are actually testing in terms of the audit work performed. Does that actually make sense? Then when you look at the acceptance and continuance procedures that are performed, some of the key deficiencies that comes through are independence matters. So when you look at the Companies Act requirements, particularly Section 90, you need to be assessing at a firm level as well. Are you performing any services, any non-assurance services? Are you preparing the financial statements for this particular client, which would then limit you from then going in and doing the audit for that client? So you need to be thinking about those assessments. When you look at the code, you need to be thinking about what is the long association risk for this particular client. How long have we been doing this audit? What is the risk at a partner level, at a firm level, at an engagement team level? Those considerations need to come through. And when we perform inspections, we don't necessarily see that coming through. If you look at your pre-engagement activities when you are accepting engagements or continuing with engagements, what we note is that these pre-engagement activities are either not performed or they are performed after the client has been accepted. So what that means is that you have your engagement letter already signed, but you haven't done your pre-engagement activities, or there's no evidence, documented evidence of those pre-engagement activities being performed before you've actually issued out and got that engagement letter signed. So it's the timing there of those activities. Again, coming through is capacity and resource constraints, which we know is a point for the SMP space, but we don't see consideration of that being documented or assessed at the point of accepting or continuing with engagements. From an engagement quality reviewer perspective, what we note is that in some instances, this is either just not performed, but it's required per firm policy, or it is in the space of a public interest entity, therefore you would have needed to use an engagement quality reviewer, but again, we don't see evidence of that. And another key deficiency that comes through is the independence and competency assessment of that engagement quality reviewer. Because remember, you need to assess if that person is independent of the client, and does that person have the industry knowledge, the experience to be able to perform a competent review and service that role appropriately? Then on the next slide, when you look at completion type of activities, some of the deficiencies that we note is with regards to the management representation letter. Management representation letters are either used as sole audit evidence, or the timing of those representation letters doesn't make sense. It's either a lot earlier than the actual signing date of the audit report. And if you look at the requirements of the standard, it does require you to get the management representation letter signed as close to and as practically possible to that audit report signing date. When you look at evaluation of misstatements, this is also a typical one that comes up where you have material misstatements on an individual basis or on an aggregate basis that are not appropriately evaluated and concluded on, either material misstatements being accepted, or what we also see is as you execute your audit work, there's misstatements that get identified, but it's not necessarily collated on your schedule of on your schedule of misstatements noted so that it can be appropriately concluded on at the completion stage and assessed on an aggregate basis. We also see deficiencies coming through on going concern evaluations where the appropriate disclosures are not made, or the audit work supporting these disclosures are either not present on files or not sufficiently documented to enable us to come to the same or reasonably the same conclusion as you would have in terms of presenting the going concern position of the client. Another typical area is the reportable irregularities considerations. So that's your RI considerations. And coupled with that is then the non-compliance with laws and regulations, the no-CLA considerations. We don't see those considerations coming through on file, again, either being just not present, not documented, or just not assessed or insufficiently assessed on the files. And then the last point there is on the financial statement presentation and disclosure reviews. So we do see a number of deficiencies coming through in this space. And when you look at it, the typical one is that there's just no evidence or there's a lack of evidence of an actual review of the financial statements and particularly of all the disclosures included in the financial statements. In the S&P space, we do see classification of financial liabilities coming through as a key point, in that it's the classification of your related party loans that are either disclosed as non-current or current, but there's not enough audit work done to substantiate or to support that classification of those financial liabilities. Again, with directors' emolument disclosures or your related party disclosures, these disclosures are either not there or the disclosures are made, but it's incomplete and there's not enough audit work done with regards to these areas. When you look at accounting policies, what we see coming through is generally the boilerplate type of accounting policies. So it's accounting policies that are not specific to that actual client. It's either policies that are generic in nature or policies that are just copied through from the group. Or sometimes we even see accounting policies that are presented, but that doesn't align to the actual treatment of those financial statement line items when they are accounted for. So that's typically an area that comes through as well. And the last point here is on the statement of cash flows. We continue to see deficiencies on this statement, and the key deficiency here is the inclusion of non-cash items in the statement of cash flows. We typically tend to see this being treated as a recalculation exercise, but remember, it is not. The statement of cash flows need to be audited. You need to perform audit work on the numbers that are disclosed there, and you need to ensure that non-cash items have been excluded. So again, these are just some of the observations that comes through when we look at the engagement file inspections performed, and particularly at that level. On the next slide is then some of the observations we note when we perform inspections on the firm's ISQM implementation. So that's the International Standard on Quality Management. So with ISQMs being recently implemented, December 2022, as the inspections department, we also embarked on various initiatives to assess what was the readiness of the profession for this standard. And what we saw coming through from surveys that we performed, from discussions that we've held with various firms, was that a lot of the smaller firms were struggling for obvious reasons with capacity or not knowing how to approach or start the implementation of the standard. And In fact, we also were hopeful to pilot some of the firms that we thought we could work with to pilot this with the implementation of the standard, but that plans also failed because the firms were not ready. And to be honest, even on our side, to an extent, even we were not fully ready for the amount of work that's needed for the implementation. But since then, we have been working closely and performing inspections at the firms, and a lot of firms have been forthcoming with their implementation plans, which has really helped us design our inspections approach around what the firms are doing. In the first year of performing inspections, we had looked at the design and the implementation of the standard at the various firms. And in the second year, what we are looking at is the testing of operating effectiveness, focusing on the monitoring of the system by the firms, together with looking at the evaluation by firm leaderships of their own systems. And so what I've listed here then is some of the most prominent findings that we see coming through. And again, remember, this is not a blanket approach across all the firms. We do see some firms, when we go out there to perform inspections, we see that those firms have really got a good system going. They've spent a lot of time invested in getting a proper system running. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we do see some of the firms where they just don't have a system implemented, or they are still in the process of implementing a system. So if we look at some of the deficiencies coming through, the first thing that comes through is the templates that are being utilized, especially in the S&P space. The templates that are being utilized are templates that are not appropriately tailored. So it's templates that don't take into consideration what is the nature of your particular firm, what is the environment of your firm, what is your client profile, which will then also determine the system that you need to have in place. Linked with that is the scalability concept in the standard that's not appropriately applied or not utilized in generating a system for that's firm specific to you. When you look at the risk assessment that's getting done, part of the firm assessment, the risk assessment is either incomplete or the risk assessment is, when you look at risk assessment, right, you got to remember risk assessment is not static. So you can't perform your risk assessment at a point in time and then place reliance into that going forward. Risk assessment needs to be updated regularly, particularly if you get new clients with a different profile. You need to take that into consideration and update your risk assessment and then assess your system of quality management to assess whether it can appropriately respond to that risk that might be coming through, for example, when you take on new types of clients. Specified responses in the standards are not considered, or we can't see why you believe that that's not applicable to your particular firm. There's no documentation in support of that. We also see that firm responses are either not operating or it's not executed effectively. Remember, these are your responses to the risks that you have identified, and sometimes the design of that is not appropriate, or as you start to implement, gaps are being identified, but you are not responding to those gaps appropriately. Then when you look at the documentation requirements, the documentation requirements does come up as a common finding because the requirements are not met in many instances, given that the nature, timing, and extent of what is required is not documented, or it's not clear in terms of how you are responding. And the last point here is on the monitoring of the ISQM system and the annual evaluation, wherein the monitoring procedures are either absent or it's not clear what procedures you are actually doing to monitor the system. Firm leadership to perform the annual evaluation that is required by the standard, to either say that your system is operating as intended or it is not because of whatever reasons, and the remediation that you intend to then implement. So again, these are just some of the points that we note under the firm inspections that we perform. And if we move on to the next slide, what we'll note is that with ISQMs, it is recently implemented, so we will continue to monitor compliance of the standard with the firms. And realistically, we do not expect to see a perfect standard or a perfect system being implemented. But we are definitely encouraged to see the amount of work that has gone in, especially by the smaller firms and the larger firms, and we'll continue to work with the firms to test and monitor their systems. So remember, again, when you look at inspections being performed, there is no expectation that we'll see no deficiencies coming through. And we have various initiatives like our proactive monitoring initiative that recognizes the importance of remediation. And if you look at the standards, particularly the ISQM standards, it talks to proactive remediation, which again is a recognition from the standards that the systems won't be perfect. So when you look at remediation, remember, with remediation, you've got to really look at what is the true root cause of the deficiency that's been reported. And if you do not identify the real or the true root cause underpinning the deficiency that's been reported, you won't be able to appropriately remediate the point, and you won't be able to take actions to prevent the reoccurrence of such deficiencies. When we engage with firms through our remediation process, some of the common root causes that comes through from the firms are things like it was insufficient documentation, methodology is not correct, or the templates are not correct, or the individuals are not following methodology, it's lack of experience. But again, these are very general type of root causes coming through. These are too general. You really need to probe further. You need to look at what is the real root cause. What we encourage a lot is looking at that 5 whys. So probe further. Why did this happen? Why? Until you get to a point where you can clearly see what is the real root cause. And that should then give you direction forward in terms of what you need to change, what you need to implement to ensure that these deficiencies don't reoccur going forward. And again, I will encourage you to look at our public inspections report, look at industry-specific guidance that is available. There's URBA guidance, there's SICA guidance. Use that to really aid you in terms of remediating some of the deficiencies that we raise, and or not even necessarily raise, things that you could have heard of today. Go back, think about those in terms of your particular firms and how you can implement things to remediate some of these points that you would have heard. And then on the next slide, my last slide, Yusuf, I can see you on. Okay, so on my next slide, what I've listed here is some of the useful resources that I believe that you can utilize to get some insights into what are some of the inspection observations coming through, what are audit quality indicators that you can focus on that can help you even in your firm space to improve on some of these points. And these are things that you can really utilize. These are links. The slides will be shared as well, so you can follow these links. And by all means, we always encourage open conversations. So if there's anything that you have questions on or any comments or inputs, please feel free to reach out to me and I will be glad to hear and provide you more feedback on anything that you might need. And again, on this particular slide is the URBA tip-offs process. I just want to quickly highlight this process for everyone. This is a new initiative that came through in our 9th cycle, and this is where you can provide tip-offs that will come through to our inspections department directly. You can tell us about anything that's not going well in the profession, any risks that you see coming through in the profession. And this tip-off process is on a completely anonymized basis. So we won't know who you are, the person you're reporting on won't know. But the intention with this is for us to purely address risk within the profession and to hopefully achieve audit quality as we go through our profession. So I'm going to stop here, and that's everything that I needed to cover.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Melanie, for your analysis on the key inspection observations at SMPs, root causes, and remediations. I just want to note that we're fortunate today to have our Director Inspections in Columbia on the call as well for the Q&A session. Good afternoon, in Columbia, and welcome. If you want to come on screen. So Melanie, due to time constraints, I see we got about a few minutes, just about 3 minutes left. There were many questions in the chat. Maybe you can just take one. Please expand on the point of documentation requirements not met.
Sure. And I will go back on the questions in the chat as well, and I will get back to the guys that have been posing questions. But with the documentation requirements not being met, so remember this is twofold, right? So if you're looking at it from a firm perspective, this is with regards to the ISQM documentation requirements. If you look at the requirements in ISQM, I'm going to say it's paragraph 54 if I'm trying to be smart here, but it's quite specific in terms of what you need to document to be able to evidence what you've considered when you've come to the conclusion that this response is going to address the risk. So it talks to you being clear on what is the nature of that response, what is the extent of that response. That needs to come through when you document your system of quality management at the firm level. So that's at the firm level. And I must say the QM standards has a lot of the details there around what you need to be documented and what you need to be documenting. And if you look at the standards, it will definitely probe you in the right direction. Then when you look at it from an engagement file inspection, on your engagement file, there's various things that you need to be documenting again. But if you look at the ISA 230 requirements, it's talking to you documenting to an extent that someone can reasonably come to the same conclusion that you would have come to when you performed the audit work. So be it the sample size that you are selecting, be it the key assumptions that you are using in your audit that's being performed. So let's say you say 5% is the right input into a particular calculation. Why 5%? We need to see that. That needs to come through in your documentation. Because remember, from an engagement file perspective, when you look at your engagement file, that file needs to stand alone and it needs to support the audit opinion that you've issued. Therefore, the documentation in that file needs to be robust enough to evidence what you've considered in concluding and signing off on that audit report. So those are just some of the key things that we need to focus on when you look at the documentation requirements.
Thank you, Melanie. Just another short one. I don't know if you want to take this. What guidance is out there on the implementation of ISQM? It's input by IRPA that help for SMEs or newly created firms implement a proper system of quality management.
So from a guidance perspective, I think there are some interpretation guides, Yusuf, if I'm not mistaken. I think from the standards department as well, there were some interpretation guides that are there. Even on the international platform, actually, there's some interpretation useful guides that were available that we can even use in our South African market. So there are some guidance available. I think what we can even do is collate some of those links and then share it to people that are questioning this point, because there is guidance available and you can utilize that to help you when you are improving on your system. Because remember, the system of quality management is forever improving. So, and that's the intention of the system. So please do utilize those guidance. They are guidance, and we'll pull together some of the links for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Melanie. Myself as well, I trained at an S&P firm. It was called GL Palm & Company. That was many years ago, but yeah, there are issues with S&P, so this helps him as well. I think there's a lot of pressing questions in the chat. Due to time pressures, I think we'll close it. Melanie, you will definitely revert anytime to some of those questions in the chat.
Absolutely. And if anyone wants to reach out to us, please feel free to even just, pop me an email and I can set up a meeting with you, and be glad to take these discussions further. Thank you so much, Yusuf. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here today, Melanie.
Yusuf, there's also a question around the inspections. Good afternoon, everyone. I didn't even greet. There's a question around the inspections and whether we could avail ourselves to do more inspections. Especially if someone is required a report for whatever reasons. I do know that there's a requirement as with the JSE that if you would like to perform, or if you're tendering for a JSE listed entity, you need to have an inspections report. If you have a similar question, you can send that to us and we'll see whether we have capacity to be able to perform those inspections.
Appreciate. Thanks, Nkambi. So we'll move on now to our third session for the day, for the program. And I'll introduce you to my colleague, Sadia Adam. Sadia Adam is a professional manager in the standards department at the IRBA. Sadia, welcome, and over to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are going to discuss a very interesting topic called building your audit team, recruitment and retention. I'm sure this is top of mind for many people. And I am joined by two phenomenal women. Let me introduce them. First up, we have Emma Mashulwane, who is the co-founder and CEO of Masa Auditors and a non-executive director of many listed entities. Aside from Emma's impressive professional CV, Emma is also an avid athlete, completing 2 Comrades Marathons and 1 World Major. We also have Dr. Tumeka, I'm going to pronounce the name correctly, Machuba Ramuetsise. She is the chairman of Ramuetsise Chartered Accountants, holds a doctorate in leadership from the University of Pretoria. When she is not busy overseeing an audit practice, Dr. Tumeka is also a senior lecturer and researcher at the University of Pretoria. And if you've ever sneaked into her LinkedIn page, you'd already see her passion for empowering young girls. This is a topic of great importance for the audit profession for all of us, because we strive to build competent, well-rounded teams that can adapt to the evolving needs of our industry. Today, we hope to cover a range of such topics, such as talent acquisitions, effective onboarding, training, and team retention. I just wanted to confirm that we do have Emma on screen as well.
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's start our discussion with talent acquisition. Dr. Tumeka, can you share some of the innovative talent acquisition strategies your firm uses to attract and retain top-tier professionals?
Thanks, Sadia. Good afternoon, everybody. So the word innovative always gets me because I don't know if they're that innovative, but they are, I think they're quite simple sort of strategies or methods, if I can call it. So we are in a space, and I think many of the SMPs probably can relate to this, where there actually are quite a number of potential trainees or graduates who typically are looking for work. So we get quite a number of emails, through the year, and we assess those and we kind of bank them for our annual intake. So it's one of the things that we do. So it's great because the people are already being proactive. And then we also do use some hiring, platforms, not here to advertise, so I won't name them. I think we know them. But, we will put out an advert that maybe we're looking for, first years in our next intake, and, we'll get some applications through there. But I think that our cold call emails actually account for quite a bit of our intake.
This is different to how it was done a long while ago, so when I was in articles, so I think it's innovative. Emma, in your experience, what strategies have proven to be successful and which ones have fallen short?
So thank you. Thank you for this invite, and good afternoon to all I'm seeing 342 on screen. I think for me, you're right. When we were doing articles, some of us in the early 2000s, recruitment was slightly different. But I think what has worked, I've seen work, particularly for us in our firm, is involving the universities. Because at the end of the day, you need to find them when they are still really trying to study. So we've collaborated with some of the universities through career expos, through guest lecturing, and we were fortunate recently to be invited to run a series of workshops to prepare honor students for coming into the workplace. So those are the things that I think for me are very important. And as an SMP as well, I think it's very key to make sure that you've got social media presence, but you make sure that you also get help, because many of us, it's easy to open a LinkedIn account, but you're not quite sure how to manage it. So I found that if you utilize particularly LinkedIn, to showcase your firm in terms of people looking for work, it really can be a very powerful way of finding talent. And I mean, we are in a generation where there's nothing is conventional. So it's important that you just manage your presence, whether it's through the career expos, the lecturing, and being responsive. Because the minute you open yourself to those channels of recruitment, you need to make sure that you manage it effectively, so you don't frustrate those who are looking for work. Yeah. And also, just lastly, VEC work is very important. It was there when I did articles. I think I was one of those who was recruited through a VEC program that I did in my first year. So those are the things that work in terms of finding talent. Yeah.
So something that all audit firms have are trainees, and they're an integral part of the audit team. But also firms dedicate a lot of resources and time in providing them with training and professional advancements. But this special relationship needs to be nurtured for the next generation of auditors. And I was wondering if, Dr. Tumeka, you can touch on some of the support that you provide your trainees with, either financial or non-financial.
Thanks, Sadia. So I'll start with financials, because that's the easiest. So we don't, unfortunately, we just don't have capacity for bursaries. However, we do offer loans to our employees who maybe are busy with CTA, which tends to be the bulk of our first years. We typically are getting people with undergraduates who are studying CTA and also need to work and sort of balance all of those requirements in their lives. And these days it's quite expensive. I think it probably always was, but in today's money terms, it really, some of these institutions cost a lot. So it's a lot for the trainees to upfront be able to pay for that. So we would do that and kind of structure a payback period over their articles. And then for trainees who are writing their exams through SAICA, we normally will pay for your first time, so we'll pay for your board course and your first time attempt. Thereafter, I mean, if you don't do well, it's not like we want the money back, but we're just not going to pay for the sort of next round of those exams. And then from a non-financial perspective, we partner people within the firm, the managers and the senior trainees with the juniors, people who've been through the same process. So if they're talking to a third year who also came in first year doing CTA, and was trying to balance, this really heavy academic side with also a very heavy technical and professional side, how they went about that. So they advise each other quite well, which I think works because as yourself and Emma said, it's been a while since we've done articles, and we remember it was tough, but I'm not as relevant in terms of trying to tell them about how to manage the whole process. So we do that, and then we always obviously offer ourselves up if they want us to go through the exam papers and assist with areas around. And I think we'll all know as well from experience that it's not sometimes that you don't know the work, it's just you don't know how to put it across that you can get the marks. So we assist with some of that, and I think my academic background usually comes in quite useful there.
I appreciate that, the support that you give to your trainees. And I was wondering, Emma, how would your firm balance technical skills and soft skills? And I'm sure that comes with the support as well.
Yeah, it does come with the support, but I also caution around trying to balance the two. I think the two are actually very integrated because I've often, picked up that, we loosely talk about soft skills, which probably should be hard skills, right? In the new generation, you talk about analytical skills, communication skills. You talk about critical skills. Those for me are actually becoming hard skills if you look at where we are going in this world. And if you look at any literary reviews, those are actually very key skills. If students or trainees possess those skills, they are able to success from a technical point of view. So I think for me, the two coexist. And yes, the soft skills are slightly difficult to measure, right? Especially at from a first year. But as people progress, it becomes a key for them to be able to know how to communicate, when to communicate, how to analyze financial statements, how do you communicate with the CFO. So those for me are very important, but the technical skills are very important. I mean, at the end of the day, we are auditors, so we want our teams to be able to audit and meet the quality requirements and comply with IFRS. So we kind of integrate the two, and they come with experience, and they really most of the time manifest with on-the-job training, over-the-shoulder training, because technical skills you can cram them in your lecture room, but the test is in the execution when someone comes to do their work. So I think in a nutshell, for me, I always encourage the teams to always focus on the soft skills, because they are an accelerator for how well you do technically, and you will see it. I mean, going forward, I honestly hope to make up from an academics that the universities will start to make some of these skills more core, to make sure that we are able to support the students technically as well. Yeah.
I love the line that the soft skills are actually the hard skills, and you're quite correct. You never stop learning on those.
Yeah.
I was wondering, both of you all touched on training and some of the initiatives you'll have. Do you make use of service providers, or does the firm do this in-house?
So I can start. So we've got a mixture. There are some, on-the-job training that obviously can only be done in-house. We've got champions around the different types of audits, for example, audit sections in-house. So that you will do in-house, induction in-house, a portion of it in-house, but also we utilize, some service providers around general skills, right? Those soft skills that we call hard skills. I'll give you an example. Our first years, when they arrive, they will do an induction in-house, but we also have a different induction, which is a lot broader than just settling in. Things like how to manage, their professional image, how to manage their finances, how to manage their stress, time management. So we do have a 2-day course that is run externally by one of the service providers, Heidi, who I've worked with, and she actually trained me back in the days in my first year in one of the big firms. So I've always been fond of how she make sure how she can train first years into settling into the workspace. And then we also use Tutor.me, which is a very a good tool online, that you allocate a mentor or a tutor to work with whether it's our bursary student. We've got 2 bursary students who are at UJ, so they benefit a lot from Tutor.me. And lastly, Novalo. Novalo is also a learning center that started by a CA as well, and she really helps from people who are struggling to pass CTA, the ITC and an APC, as well as CIA from an internal audit point of view, and CISA. So she helps with the material and exam technique in particular on how to get the most marks when they sitting for exams. So those are just a few of the external service providers that we use, and we use others for the technical ISQM, for example, that Melanie spoke about earlier. Yeah.
Dr. Temeka.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to add, honestly, other than to say that, yes, we also do a little bit of in-house and then outsource quite a few things, things like especially Excel training, and, you don't want to be teaching people that because you're also not that perfect at it. So it's nice to kind of have an external provider who's going to, teach them the latest tools. We've had people come and even speak to our guys about, safe use of AI tools and how to incorporate those properly into work and checking and all of that stuff. So, as Emma says, you kind of do a balance between what you may need externally and then what you can provide internally, because also that also takes resources from you as well, trying to do internal training, and it might be more efficient to actually get in, people who already know in the first week of first year articles, what do you kind of teach people? We did have to be taught even how to be dressed, I remember. Yeah. So, those things do become important. Yeah.
I also remember that training. I also think that with some of the training, we might be learning from our trainees, some of the integration and technology. And I think we should be open to it. So since COVID, audit firms have been balancing this benefit of hybrid working environments, and as well as the necessities of returning to the office, which supports learning and strengthening client relationships. Emma, do you want to tell us about your approach to coin terms such as work-life balance and flexibility to support your team?
Yeah. So I am less likely to say work-life balance. I'm probably going to say work-life integration, because for me, I think you need to integrate. I always look at my own calendar and I say I need to go, be cheering my son on at soccer. I need to go for an audit committee. I need to run the business. So I always try and make sure that you integrate all the aspects into one. And that way one is able to prioritize. So to prioritize what needs to be done on a day-to-day basis. So I know with COVID, people tried to do the hybrid. And the reality is it's very difficult to audit online, right? You can use tools, but not to go on site. You're missing the intuition, There are certain times when you ask a client a question, it's in their eyes, and you're never going to see the right answer doing it online on Teams like this. So I've always, in the beginning, I understood that some of the people have really restructured their lives, when COVID happened. But I've always in the beginning said, we will try the flexibility working from home on certain days. But the reality is the trainees, it becomes difficult because you can see they're missing that ability to access the senior team members to just ask for help. It becomes very, the turnaround is quite slow if people are always working at home. So I've always, reluctantly, I know some of them were reluctant in the beginning, but I've always said I prefer you going to a client. You can be flexible around arriving at work, but there are certain times that I think everyone should be at work, right? If, we've got an 8-hour day, there are certain core times that each team must make sure that they are at work to be able to, work and collaborate better as a team. So in a nutshell, I'm saying I don't believe in work-life balance because something is going to drop. I think rather people must integrate, especially post-COVID. You need to integrate your life so you can prioritize and you can be flexible. But remember that if you're not responsive, flexibility comes with trust. If you've already dropped the ball sometime, your manager or your partner is not going to allow you to be flexible. So it really depends on the level, Sadia, because you first need to build trust that you can do certain roles on your own. You meet the timelines, you are producing quality work. And once that is done, you can claim flexibility at a certain level.
Dr. Temeka, I can see you nodding in agreement,
Yeah,
but you also have,
yes.
I want to give you the exact same question, but I also want to maybe touch on your role as a lecturer and working with students as well.
Mm-hmm.
What are their expectations and how do you support this narrative of the new way of working with versus what's needed for trainees and stuff?
So I don't work with undergraduate students anymore. Unfortunately, I got too old and I felt out of touch. So I'm not really involved, in the sort of technical accounting space in terms of students. But what I will say that I've noticed at university, even from the sort of deal with students from honors upwards, even though it's not the accounting honors, is that there is this blend of online and this, and of course it makes things easier. If a student wants to consult with me, and this goes right up to my postgrad students, my master's and doctoral students, if you want to consult with me, why do we need to sit in the same room if it's going to take us a week to find a time for us to be in the same room versus we can chat later today or tomorrow? However, I think, with the young graduate who then be coming into the workspace, as Emma says, it's really difficult to teach somebody audit and that the intuition around audit and the things you need to look out for online. You need people there with them, the people who've done it before. So their next senior and the AIC and manager right up to you, because sometimes as even the engagement partner, I find sitting in the room with the team and just talking through the issues and saying, guys, what have you seen? What is this? And what do you think about that? We get a lot more out for me to get that warm and fuzzy feeling around where this audit is going, and what I need to start engaging the client on. And again, there's the thing of when they need help. If they're sitting elsewhere, like at home, they might take 2 hours to decide finally to ask the question that they might have asked after 15 minutes of struggling if they were in the same location. And I think that's just human nature. I know if I'm sitting at home working on a document, I might try for longer to figure something out than if I'm in the same room with the two of you and I can just say, oh, Emma, this thing, and then quickly move on. So I also, at our firm, when we were sort of legally allowed to come back to the office, we said, guys, this is the most efficient way to do it. Even clients, they were struggling. I mean, clients who themselves said, no, we're doing hybrid work, they've brought their people back to the office because they're saying this is the only way to actually be efficient, especially if you've got a lot of young staff, which audit firms typically we do. Our intake is younger and younger, so to speak. So we have very young teams, people who don't yet have a full grasp of responsibility around deliverables and timelines, and you kind of have to teach that in person.
So we haven't touched on the manager topic as yet. How do you reinvigorate or invigorate managers that have been in the profession for some time? And sometimes the SMP firms are small, so career progressions might seem like something that takes a long time. So do you have any solutions to this here and to tackle that problem of managers? Same question for both of you. Dr. Temeka, do you want to go first?
Oh, I was hoping Emma would go first.
Oh,
then
sure.
I can just say everything Emma says. So yeah, I mean, look, it's sure, trying to sort of rah-rah the RA profession, and I really am. I love it. I know it's usually strange, but I really do. I think it's a great space to be in. But at the same time, lots of risks. And, the younger people are saying, does the money match up to the risk? And, if I stay here, be a manager, do I want, so we encourage that, guys, post articles, if you're going to stay here, make it worth your while, right? So get on the ADP, Worst case, you become an RA and then you don't. It's okay. You never use it, but you might. And I believe that it's personally for me in any case, I think it's a profession that has broadened my scope of what I can do and opened a lot of opportunities to me. And you can actually start a business, for example, be an SMP for yourself. So it's also trying to show, the managers who are coming up, we all understand the risk. I think everywhere we read, we're just hearing what a hard space this is. But you also want to show them, the good side of it, which I think there really is, and the ability to engage with people across various industries and sectors, which for me is very interesting. I love the fact that I'm dealing with people in different spaces. At times, if you've got like 4 clients at once, it's a bit hard to compartmentalize that brain, but it's a good, space to kind of be in. And we try to provide our guys with as much experience as possible. So we even rotate clients between the assistant managers and managers to say, as you've been on this client for 3 years now, and maybe you want to see something different. So we start to swap them over. Obviously, we always talk to the clients to say, look, this is part of our model, because you also don't want to be sort of one-man resource dependent. You've got the one manager knows the client super well, and then they move on. So you always want to show people that there's space to learn and grow even within the small practice environment.
Emma, any reflections?
Yeah, so I think just quickly, I mean, just to add on to what Tumeka has said, we do similar things, but I think also just transparency around opportunities available. I think, for an SMP, not all SMP, SMPs have different service lines. So I think for MASA, the MASA team, we are fortunate that we've got a sizable outside external audit. We've got a sizable internal audit and IT audit practice as well, which I find has helped the CAs in particular to be able to gain different skills outside traditional external auditing. But also, I think I always tell my teams that, if you choose to be in the auditing space, I mean, there are people who are still thinking I'm crazy to still be in audit, but I love it. Like Tumeka said, I really love it. I'm passionate about auditing. And I always say, keep learning. There are various opportunities to learn, but also you don't have to always just do traditional external audit type training. Some of the ladies in the office have been fortunate to be part of the FACET Executive Development Program, and it's really helped them develop them as managers and as young leaders, and they've thoroughly enjoyed it. And we've had one of our senior managers go on a GIPS Nexus program. Now, it's not even there's nothing about auditing in that program, but it really teaches you how to, sell, how to work with senior leadership, being our CFOs. So there's various things that I think I always say to the managers, never stop learning. As long as you're here, yes, you're an RA, we need to keep you an RA, but try and get other skills to develop you as a future leader.
And what greater role models than the woman on the screen? You'll have done exactly that. You'll have multifaceted and everything you're speaking about, like authenticity, it comes through. I have 3 minutes to go, but I'm going to ask the biggest question. And that is this bridging the generational gap. In a firm, we have many people of different generations, and I want to know, what approach are you all taking when you're promoting this mutual understanding and collaboration? One lesson or something for us to take away and reflect on.
I think for me, the biggest thing is to allow this generation to teach us how to train them, how to manage them, how to lead them. Just because I did certain things 10 years ago, it doesn't make them still relevant. So I think for me, that's always an aha moment when I work with my team. So I try and make sure that I let them lead, whether it's the social committee. Our chair of the social committee is the second year. Our chair of the athletics club is the second year. And, everybody, the young people must lead the firm in whatever small spaces that they are. But I think the biggest thing is just them showing us how to train them, how to manage them within a team environment. I think that has worked really well for me. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's the communication and making sure that you're open to, hearing their views and what they think as well. We're constantly learning from our young people. And as Emma's saying, there's no ways I could be in charge of the social committee, because what I like to do is definitely not what they like to do. So we let them run with that, and we kind of just find ourselves in spaces that we wouldn't ordinarily go to. But it's good because we get to see what excites them, and what kind of people they are. People really come out of their shell when you give them an opportunity to socialize with each other and with you in a more relaxed, environment that is not just work. So we do try and make time for that kind of thing as well.
Thank you so much for the openness and the conversation. I think we could have a whole day session on this here.
Yeah.
Just before we close, any closing words before we hand back to Yusuf?
So I think for me as an SMP, I think it's important that we understand our teams, because I think that's the leverage we're going to get to be able to deliver quality to our clients. So understand our teams and not be scared to delegate. We can achieve more when we work together as a team. So it's one thing that really resonates with me. And there's one quote I wanted to leave you with from Harry Truman. It says, "It is amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets credit." So it doesn't have to be the directors who get credit, the shareholders who gets credit, the team. As long as the team is working together and delivering quality, therein is the accelerator to achieve greatness.
And I guess from my end, it's just also have an authentic culture. I think if you know who you are, and, as the owners of the firm, the people who are running the practice and what you're about, it's easier. You don't confuse people. I think, what your values are and what people are signing up for and into becomes very evident. And I think that's how you will get the best match. If you are authentic, you're going to get people who align with you so much easier.
I don't run a practice, but I feel like I need to take these things and think about my parenting style, my lifestyle, my inspiration. Thank you so much, ladies. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and I'll hand over to Yusuf.
Thank you, Sadia, and to our two dynamic panelists. This was a really engaging and dynamic discussion on the recruitment and retention. Your practical advice and honestly, your innovative strategies will definitely empower practitioners to build stronger teams in their firms. Colleagues, we have now reached our part of the program. We take a comfort break. We will resume again at 20 to 3. And just thank you for all our panelists for the expert advice. See you later. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to the second half of the Inside a Small and Medium Practice, the Practitioner Stay in Focus. For those of you who are just joining us, we are now on the fourth session, and that is tips for crafting a cutting-edge technical team. For this purpose, I would like to introduce Delia McLean. Delia is the Technical Audit Director and the CEO at Core Incorporated. She is based in Bloemfontein. She has become one of the youngest directors at 28. Delia oversees the audit and assurance functions at Core. Delia, over to you, please.
Thank you, Yusuf, and thank you to everyone for the opportunity to speak to you today. I was quite surprised when I got the call to ask whether I would be able to present today. We were one of the firms that were lucky enough to be visited by earlier the year. Koen spoke about it. And I clearly remember Imran sitting there, and he was first circling a note he made. And then later on, he said that he'd never heard anyone speak so bluntly about the challenges faced in the S&P environment and things happening. So I would never have thought that I would be given the platform like this to speak from to start off. But yes, thank you so much. So I firstly want to start off to say I definitely do not have all these answers to these challenges. But what I would like to share with you today is something that worked for us, and I hope to bring across a message today of why I think you should invest in a technical team. So firstly, let me just, next slide, thanks. Just maybe set the scene of how I see the overview of, we can just go to the next slide there, just how I see the overview of where the S&Ps are currently in South Africa. So firstly, what's the role? Where are we in the audit landscape? So more than 90% of our country's companies are SMEs. They employ more than 50% of the SA workforce. Most of these companies are owner-managed, and from experience, they prefer to work with SMPs as they feel that they can relate to us as clients, with us from a client perspective. So that's where I see where we are. Then, like I said, challenges faced as a S&P. We have quite a few challenges that we face, which is a bit of unique in the auditing environment. We have limited budgets, limited resources, staffing we just spoke about, increased regulatory pressures, and the challenges of the work-life balance, or how I just heard work-life incorporate, in any case, which is a challenge at this stage. But then also, if there's challenges and if people are struggling with this, we should always realize that there is opportunities in this. So from an opportunity perspective is the more registered auditors, the more all these companies still need auditors. And if people are not willing to adapt and change, you as a firm who are willing to change do have opportunities for this work. So with this increasing demand, we realize there's an increasing demand for reliable audits among SMEs. If you speak to bankers and to your clients, they really want good financial statements which they can rely on. So from my side, I would then like to highlight the significance of building a skilled technical team to enhance audit quality and efficiency. If you ask me, this is really the heart of the audit department, and I will say it again at a later stage again. So my objective for today is maybe understanding this unique S&P environment and to highlight the importance and strategies for S&P to still develop and scale a high-performing technical team that's capable of driving innovation and success in this audit environment despite of the challenges. And then I might maybe also want to highlight the importance of quality training, relationships, and communication. We can move on to the next slide. So firstly, let's understand just the technical skills gap, because I think there's quite a big technical skills gap at this stage. So we have skill shortages in the audit profession, but not just trainees and all of that. We especially have a shortage in individuals that have a passion for auditing, that like to give training, that like this precision work and this ever-changing and regulated environment. The number of registered auditors that are currently leading the profession in South Africa has been a point of concern as the retention rates are declining. We are losing more auditors than what we are getting at the moment. And if you look at IRBA's annual reports, it indicates that we have 754 less ROs than 10 years ago, which is 21%. So, but this is not the only skills gap that we have. We also have a skills gap in the future skills that we need. We need to have not only have the competencies of this, we need the competencies to navigate the evolving audit landscape as well. So it's not only the individuals that are passionate about auditing, but we also need to include AI, machine learning, and data interpretation. We need to be open to the evolving landscape, which is rapidly changing, and thus we need the future auditor. So we need to find ways of being more efficient while still maintaining a high quality. So if we move on, according to me, just see the next slide, according to me, to build a technical team, what is important? So firstly, let's start off with why I say it's a necessity of a technical team. As an SMP, you maybe laugh at me and say, because this is actually seen as a luxury, as we do not necessarily have the resources to have a team that can only do technical work. They are too expensive and cannot incorporate them in the budgets. But what I want to tell you today, or what I want to state, is that we will have to change our mindset on this. This is in fact a necessity and not a luxury. As I said previously, the heart of the audit department. If you think that no matter how small an audit firm is or how limited your budgets are, we are all still required to comply and stay up to date with the changes in legislation and regulations. This is why I believe we do need a technical team. The composition and the function, however, might be very different from that of a large firm, as the team might consist maybe of one or more of the partners, a manager, but someone needs to be specifically tasked with the function of keeping the firm up to date. As these individuals, and important, like I said, these individuals will definitely also be part of your normal audit team. So that's where the composition changes a bit. But what we realized, if you do not task someone specifically with keeping the firm up to date, this is always not going to be priority, because there's one deadline after the next deadline. So someone needs to be specifically tasked with this function. So another important factor for me with regards to building a team is we realized that diversity is a strength. So we need to highlight the importance of having a diverse team in driving the innovation and problem solving. From our own perspective, we realized that just because something has been done a certain way, it's not necessarily the best way. So you need the different people, the different perspectives to see how people to bring the strength to this technical team. And what we found is to reward innovative solutions and contributions will also help to enhance the audit process. Like I said, we want to have faster and more effective, but still of a high quality audits. The next slide. So the next part of the building the technical team is we just had a very interesting panel discussion, but the recruitment strategies. So they start also off with saying we first need to attract top talent. So this would be partnerships with universities or professional bodies. So that is firstly. But from my perspective, the more important thing for me is the effective training and mentorship. If you get these articles clerks, that you now give them during their articles. And one of the things I found is that the mentors of these trainees must be passionate of what they do, about what they do, to transfer this passion and this skills to the next generation. So firstly, you need to ensure that as a firm, you identify the right individuals to retain as part of a technical team and support them and make them feel valued for their skills, because not everyone can be a rainmaker, but you can really see the person that is good in this and just support them and also make them feel valued so that you can retain them rather as they come from the firm. The next part that is important for me is the inclusion practice. So you need to create a culture, an inclusive culture that fosters collaboration and creativity. So you need to foster an environment where team members can experiment with new ideas and technologies without the fear of failure. Next portion, slide please. So from my point of view, what I would say, what's the 5 basis points for a strong technical team? So the most important one would then firstly be technical knowledge. So you need to ensure this technical team of yours have a solid grounding in auditing standards, financial reporting and taxation relevant to South Africa. You are also required, if you have industry-specific engagements like attorney trust and all of that, you need to ensure that you have the right technical experience for those engagements. This team member should have a clear understanding of the firm's methodologies, audit software, audit approaches, how to design audit procedures for a specific client using a risk-based approach. And very importantly, they need to understand scalability in the audit process. They need to understand how procedures can be adjusted for smaller businesses without compromising the quality and the compliance of the audit. And from a technical point of view, one of the most important things for me was to maintain a technical databases with guidance, templates, and working papers that already complies with the relevant standards to ensure compliance and adherence of quality standards, and that the team has access to this to save some time in the future. If we can move on. The second point that I would like to is quality management system. So it's important, you heard Melanie speak about the quality management system that we all need to implement, but also to emphasize the importance we realize this every day, of good peer reviews, of compliance monitoring, to ensure that there's an alignment with the regulatory standards and that the office policies and procedures are implemented by everyone. So this is quite an important function for me of this team. Thirdly, training. So as I said, the composition of this team might differ because these people who are also your technical will probably be your managers. They will be on the job. So they will provide on-the-job guidance and support to your audit teams. But they are also not only that, in our firm, for instance, they are responsible for monthly updates with the rest of the firm. So it's important that all partners or staff are proactively trained on new developments. And these people are also tasked with this function. So, and not all of us can give training on all matters. So if they identify any items that they cannot train themselves, it's important that they source the right individuals to come and train the firm on the specific topic. The fourth part, we can move on to the next slide, thanks, would be communication. So communication is usually quite a big buzzword. Whenever there's something wrong, usually one of the words that come out as a problem is communication. So from a technical team, this is also important to have good internal collaboration, to encourage open dialogue with the team that can help address challenges and foster innovation. And it's important for me that the technical support staff should be available and approachable. So it should be, like I said, it will probably be on the job, but if not, it must be easy accessed and in time help that they give the staff members. Then the second part that's important of communication is with the client. And in the S&P environment, it's important to effectively communicate audit findings to our SME clients, to translate these technical terms into practical insights. Others require regular communication with the clients to understand their needs and their expectations so that we can improve on our service delivery in this aspect. And then finally, what's also one of the important things about communication, that the technical accuracy that they need to review all of these communications, like engagement letters, management letters, and especially audit reports. We should ensure that all communications should be clear, understandable, and transparent at this stage, and would also form part of this technical team's function. And then lastly, I would say feedback and adaptation. So regular reviews, just to ensure we do performance evaluations to assess that the individuals and the teams are operating effective, and to identify areas for improvement and training within ourselves as well. Constructive feedback is a very important point for me. So this is coaching notes. In an auditing firm, everyone hates a coaching note. We are perfectionists. We don't like the personal assault as soon as you get a coaching note. So I feel it's important to create a culture where feedback is seen as a tool for growth rather than criticism. So this is important in how we structure our coaching notes and how we do that. And then in the firm, that this is never used as a stick to get to someone, but rather as a constructive feedback. They need to be responsive to change. So in the audit, like I said, the audit landscape is continuously evolving. So the team needs to quickly adapt to changes in regulation, technologies, or client demands for that matter in order to be successful. And another thing that we found important where we wanted is crisis management, to ensure that the team know how to handle unexpected challenges, maintain high service levels, even under pressure. So this is something that's also important for me in a technical department. So next slide, please. So all of this is good and well, and you're going to tell me, but this unfortunately do cost not only money, but also time. So you really need to invest in training and development for this technical department to function effectively. So CPD is the word. So it's not only important for ongoing education in technology and regular updates to maintain audit relevance, but this team really needs to read all alerts and all announcements to identify any changes. So it is important for them to stay up to date. They have to be up to date, the SIPC, the Master, IRBA, SAICA, and SARS. So you really need to give these individuals sufficient time to ensure that they are up to date. We also require them to have some sort of industry association or community involvement, because then they can, if you ensure that they are part of the right technical networks and forums to identify these matters. In today's interconnected world, I feel that networking is a vital tool for driving growth, innovation, and strategic direction. To building connections within, in and beyond your industry unlocks new opportunity and strengthens you as your organization's resilience. With regard to CPD, I want to again highlight to be proactive in implementing the changes. The guidances are not always out in time. So I also feel that you, like in these firms, that you find your right soundboards, if I can call it like that, to discuss these changes and the possible effect that they have in order to implement these changes proactively in the firm. And what the team needs to realize is that they are now not only responsible for their own CPD, but like I said, they have to do the monthly staff update to ensure that the firm is up to date. So there should be sufficient time allocated to them for their own CPD to be relevant and then to train the rest of the firm. Another important factor where we need to invest in time is the structured mentorship programs, like I said. I would always promote mentorship initiatives to help the junior staff learn from experienced auditors and technical experts. Like I say, you can really see the person that would thrive under these circumstances and make sure that they are mentored by the right person. And the last part where we need to invest in is technology and tools. So I think it's important to explore the role of audit software and automation tools that streamline the processes for smaller entities. And this is also something that they have to look at, and ensuring that to ensure that we comply and we are efficient. We would also encourage team members to maybe pursue relevant certifications in areas like data analytics, cybersecurity, or advanced auditing techniques, and then they should utilize these skills on the audit. I also always say these technologies enable the auditors to process larger volumes of data with more precision, and you can identify these anomalies or risks or patterns a lot more swiftly than with the traditional methods. So it's important that we invest and spend on some technology and tools with regards to that. So this is going to bring me to my conclusion today. So in conclusion, I would say that scaling success in South Africa in the S&P audit environment hinges on the strategic development of a cutting-edge technical team. The challenges of skills shortages and the rapidly evolving audit landscape necessitate a shift in the mindset, viewing a technical team not only as a luxury, but as an essential component of the audit excellence. So by fostering a diverse, inclusive, and a collaborative culture, S&P can harness innovative solutions that enhance audit quality and efficiency. And then my last slide, you'll see it's actually a video clip, but it's just maybe a bit of a tongue in the cheek, but just to highlight the importance that you should always remember that as S&P, we should still find the right balance. So you can have the right degree and all the technical knowledge in the world, but on its own, it will not necessarily result in success. Thank you. You can play the clip.
Sorry, Clelia. We just had some connectivity issues on the clip. When we send it out, audiences can play it on their own.
Okay, but yeah, I can just talk.
Sorry, Yusuf, we did resolve it. Can we try?
Okay, thank you.
She is the best break dancer female that we have for Australia.
Are you sure about that?
Thank you. So I don't know if you guys know this, but it's just like I said, a bit of a tongue in the cheek, because that lady actually has lots of technical and a degree in movement, but did not necessarily result in any success. So you need to find the right balance with your rainmakers, your team, and the right technical skills. So not only technical skills. So I think we are moving over to some of the Q&A. I don't know if I was too quick or too, however, but I think if there's any questions at this stage.
First, Delia, thank you for your enlightening presentation. It was truly an eye-opening session, and I'm sure everyone on this call gained valuable insights from your expertise. I didn't pick up anything from the chat. Maybe I can just pose a question to you. From my side, it's how does the firm absorb the cost of having a technical department?
Thank you. So, yes, like I said, I think it's finding the right balance. So in our firm, they don't only do technical work. So it's a balance between allocating the hours to a portion of technical work of this training, but they also need to do productive work as managers and on the team where they review some of the assurance work. So it's finding the right balance in that. And if you effectively train your firm, if they are the ones that's keeping it up to date and then effectively training your firm, that is also a cost saving instead of everyone trying to do this and reinventing the wheel all on their own. And for us as a firm, it's also to look at the cost of non-compliance, which was just too high for us not to address. So for us, like again, the right balance of a bit of enough technical, but also enough production work, which we can build out to ensure that we still make that fees, it's still profitable for the firm.
Appreciating this last one. From your suggestion, how would you suggest or how a practitioner go about choosing or developing the right person for a technical department?
Choosing is, like I said, I think you can really see the person that is a technical. The previous ladies that spoke, both of them immediately said they love being RAs. So usually they are the people that really like technical work, people like that, you just understand them. But for me, the most important part of it is the right mentor. I had a lady in my office the other day, and one of her comments was, we were talking about the trainees and people who weren't passionate about auditing, and she made a very clear comment to me that resonated with me to say, you can never have a passionate person if the person who mentored or trained that person isn't passionate about their own topic. So make sure you choose the right people that you use to train and to mentor these staff, because if they who have a passion can make it, can transfer the skills to them, you can really, that for me is specific, is the right person, or to choose the right person. And also, if they already have your firm's culture, for me, it will also be, it's also, if you don't have it inside, you need to source them. But for me, it's easier to mentor through articles and then create them and make them part of our team. That was our strategy.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Delia. Next up, we have our last presenter for the day, and that is Zuleika Jasper. Zuleika is the owner and CEO of Zuleika Coaching and Consulting Services. She's a chartered accountant by profession, also holds a master's degree in accounting. She spent over 20 years in the external auditing profession, but in 2018, Zuleika embarked on a new career and qualified as International Leadership and Master Life Transformation Coach. So on that, welcome, Zuleika, and over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to be with you, and also lovely to hear some of the very interesting conversations that have happened. So we're going to have a very short discussion around stress. As I was listening to some of the topics being discussed, it was actually almost, I felt a little bit stressed for all the practitioners out there, thinking of everything that you have to do, everything that you need to focus on, and all the different competing priorities that you have. And how do we deal with that stress ourselves? And also, how do we deal with that stress that is sitting within our team? Now, I don't know whether you can see oh, there goes the presentation. So if we can move to the next page, please. So people always ask me, what is stress? What does it entail? And there's a whole host of different definitions of what stress is. This one is really one that is close to my heart because I think it's so true for practitioners. It's that inability to decide what's important. And the real problem is there are so many things that feel that they are important. And as a consequence, I get torn in all sorts of directions. So you will see as we talk about what we can do to deal with our own stress and also with the stress of our team, we're going to come back a little bit to this whole inability to decide what is important. What do I need to focus on next? So on the next slide, we have good and bad stress. Now, I know that especially the younger people think that stress is bad. It's really not the case. We have good and bad stress. Now, if we look at good stress is really short-term. And that is that thing that gives you a go. It's like I know something has to be done this afternoon, and it just allows me to focus, and all my energy is going into this one thing, and I'm enhancing my performance. The problem is coming in with a bad stress. So when we look at bad stress, it could be one of two things. Bad stress can be quite acute, so for a short period of time. That's normally what our deadlines do to us, eh? That you've got for 2 weeks, we're going to focus, and that is it. And then that can still be okay. Where the real problem comes in is with the long-term or the chronic stress. Now, unfortunately, in an audit practice, that is what most of the time happens because you have deadline after deadline after deadline, and there's all these other things that you have to do, and that results in chronic stress. Now, the easiest way for you to identify that you do have chronic stress is when you have things like, headaches, and, the Banados don't work for the headache. Insomnia, that's a very common one. Weight gain, anxiety, high blood pressure, pains and aches, not feeling like you can get out of bed in the morning, and it really wears you out. So unfortunately, that's the one that we would like to address. Now, the big question is, how do we do that? So if we move our slide, please. So just maybe to put bad and good stress in a little bit of a picture format or a table. We all are accountants deep down, so we like to see graphs and the like. You have calmness. Now, that's not good for you. As much as people want calmness, the reality is you get bored out of your mind, and that's normally when people are bored that they don't perform well. So, we must also be careful when we try and address stress in the workplace that we don't try to make it such a calm place that people don't perform. Then you get this middle section, and that's really the peak performance. That is where you have stress. However, there's time to de-stress, and it's stress and de-stress, stress and de-stress. And as a consequence, there's a good balance. However, and then you got the real distress on the other side. That is where it's becoming a health problem and ultimately will result in burnout. And unfortunately, I work with people across various industries. I can tell you that in the audit profession, there is proportionately a bigger group of people sitting in that bucket. Hence, we're talking about stress today, and hence we have to find a way to address it. Now, let's first look at how you, from a personal point of view, can address your own stress. So when we move to the next slide, the first thing that you can do is to be organized. Okay, this picture is a little bit tongue in the cheek. I don't expect you to be that organized. However, are we organized? Do I, at the beginning of every day, know what I'm going to do today? And yes, there will be curveballs, but do I have control over 75% of what's happening in my day? Do I, for example, know what time I'm going to get up, what I'm going to focus on first, how long I'm going to spend working on that? What is the next thing that's going to happen? Do I already know what time am I going to break for lunch? Do I already know what I want to achieve? That should be something that we do on a daily basis. I would recommend beginning of every day, spend 10, 15 minutes planning what's happening today. And with that being realistic, we have this thing about we want to be organized and we come up with everything that we have to do. But here's the reality. No normal human being can do what we plan on doing in a day. And as a consequence, I never meet the objectives. And because I never meet my objectives, I run the risk that I will burn out because I constantly are under stress. It's like running a race and you run 20 kilometers, so 21 kilometers. And on the 20-kilometer mark, they say to you, oh, we're so sorry, we forgot to tell you, this is actually not a 21-kilometer race, it's a 40-kilometer race. And when you get to 38 kilometers, they say to you, oh, by the way, this is unfortunately not just a 40-kilometer race. You now need to run until 60 kilometers. We create that stress. So with being organized goes saying no. And then, very important, in order to be organized, I need to have a plan. Warren Buffett said an idiot with a plan can beat a genius without a plan. And that is so true. Now, plan also include telling a client no. So quick little story. So I spent 20 years in the audit profession, and now I sit on the other side of the table. So I do sit on boards where we engage with auditors. And, when I was an auditor, I thought that the client dictated deadlines. They come up with the deadlines, and as the auditors, we just need to step in and just do what we have to do. Whether that's audits, whether that's tax work, doesn't matter. It always felt like the client was dictating what should happen. Now, I just had the privilege on one of the companies where I am, where an auditor said to me, no, we can't make that deadline. And you know what? I got so much more respect for that guy. I didn't got angry with him. I wasn't upset. I actually was so impressed, and I just, okay, well, then what is an ideal time frame that we can look at? So never underestimate being organized, assessing what is the leftover, and then say no for that and move things out. And sometimes you have to say, I can't do something, and it is okay. If someone decides to fire you because you don't make a deadline or that you say no to a deadline, well, then it's most probably good riddance, to be dead honest. If we move on in terms of the next item and this goes without saying, and I know you're going to say, yo, man, we hear this all the time. Do not underestimate having good, nutritious food. Unfortunately, when we're under stress, we want to keep our energy levels high. So what do? Sugar. Always the sugar and the starch. I mean, they're so comfortable. And then you add on to that, when we were kids, and this is true for all cultures, whenever we sad, we eat. When we're happy, we eat. When we stress, we eat. It's almost like when we find food to be the answer to any problem that there is. If you can continue to actually eat the right stuff, even though you're under pressure, you will find that you can handle your stress better. Now, it goes back to being organized, because if I'm not organized and plan my day, well, then maybe the only thing that I can have for lunch is a chocolate, because I never planned for lunch. So they go all hand in hand. And then on the next item, it's all about also getting some physical exercise. Now, I'm not saying go and sign up at a gym. It's simple things. Instead of taking the lift, take the stairs. In the morning, run the stairs in your house. You don't have to do big things. Something that I do, and you're really going to laugh at this, I have one of these small trampolines who is actually sitting in my study. So I have between client meetings 15 minutes. I normally make sure I've got a 15-minute just to gather my thoughts, clear my mind. 5 of the 15 minutes, I jump on the trampoline. When you get to the end of the day, you most probably have spent an hour on the trampoline. So find what works for you, but you need to get oxygen on the brain. That's the best thing that you can do for yourself. On the next item, something that will help you is to have a community. Now, there was quite a number of speakers today, a lot of interactions that happened. This is part of your network. You need to have a network where you can bounce ideas of what are you doing. And I know we are in competition. However, we are also part of a bigger community. And the reality is there are enough work for all of us. So I don't have to sit in my corner fighting my little fight and not sharing with you. If we can, as a community of small practitioners, become more sharing ideas, sharing, successes, sharing maybe ways in which we address matters, that will put us in a very, very good place. And then last but not least, in terms of managing your own stress. So I'm happy to see all the claps and the hearts coming up when we talk about a community. I think it's very important. Now, the last thing in terms of managing your own stress is to limit your time on social media. I do appreciate that social media is important. I'm not saying don't be on social media. I'm just wondering, how much time do we spend there and what do we spend time on? A while back, I saw a picture where someone said, what does life on social media look like? And they showed this beautiful apple, but behind the apple, there's a mirror, and it's actually a rotten apple on the one side. So what do you see on social media? This beautiful apple. In the meantime, on the back side, it's rotten. So when you are on social media, be sure what you follow, who you follow, what you spend time on. The more that I look at other people's perfect lives, and it's perfect lives because not all that perfect, the more I sit back and think, golly, okay, if they manage it and things are going so well for them, clearly I'm the problem. Little do I know. It's like when you have children. So something that new mums often tell me is, when you go on social media and you look at, other mums, then you get this picture of this baby sitting there in their pram or their little chair and all nicely dressed and all smiley or sleeping. And no one tells you that that was just the 2 minutes. The other 23 hours and 58 minutes were complete chaos. But because you see that, you think that is the way that it should be. And it's really not the way that it is. So be careful of what you follow, who you follow, and how much time you spend on social media. Make a point of subscribing to feel good areas. Good news. I think, for example, about Good News South Africa. It's all about good news, not the bad news. Maybe that's where we should spend some of our time as opposed to all the problems. And then when I say limit social media, I'm also talking about what do I do when I wake up in the morning? It's the first thing that I do, grabbing my phone and then go, what's happening? And then I see the news and it's just doom and gloom. Remember, you can't unsee what you have seen. And we feed our mind with everything that we see and hear. So these are just 6 very simple tips to manage your own stress. Now let's get to how you can manage the stress of your teams. Well, the first and most important one is to lead by example. If I don't manage my stress, how can I expect my team to manage their stress? And don't think that you can hide it. You know, it's interesting. We all think that we can, you know, just put on this poker face and then no one will notice. Trust me, people can feel it. You know, when you walk into a meeting room, you can actually sense, was this now a good conversation or was it not a good conversation? Without anyone saying a word, you can feel the energy. So if I don't lead by example, my team can feel my stress, and that is causing stress. So you need to take one, well, maybe hopefully all 6, but some of those 6 items that I've just discussed and say, okay, what can I do? Because if I reduce my stress level and have healthy ways of dealing with it, so will my team. When we move on to the next item, it is all about talking about stress. Now, when I say talk about stress, I'm not talking about a bitching and moaning session, you know, because stress is part of our lives. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, the day when we decided to become chartered accountants and registered auditors, we actually signed up for a certain level of stress. Now we need to talk about it. Do we ask questions about how do you manage stress? When last have you asked your team how they are managing their stress? When last have you shared perhaps some of your own stories of how you are managing stress? And when I say we talk, we also come up with solutions. You know, I always say to people that talking about something is not going to fix it. Yes, it might make me in the moment feel better. However, we need to also come up with a plan. So when we talk, very important to also come up with a plan of action. And plan of action can never be, okay, well, you go home because you're stressed, we'll get someone else to do it. Because all that I'm doing is I'm taking the stress and moving from one person to the next. So we need to look at the systematic and system problems that we have within our teams. When we move on to the next item, it's maybe, and this is just something for you to consider, maybe you would like to give team members mental health days. Now, I'm not talking about a full day. Maybe it's just a morning. Now, be careful. I can give you a morning and then expect you in the afternoon to catch up on everything that you were supposed to do in the morning. That's not really a mental morning. However, if I say to you, go and for 3 hours, look after your mental health. And we actually monitor whether people are looking after their mental health. You know, so again, doesn't help that they take the 3 hours to sort out admin. That's not mental health. Or to go and do shopping. I mean, that's also not mental health. Maybe for some people that's some good therapy, but still, maybe consider having mental health days. Maybe people get a 2 or a 3 hour mental health break somewhere during the course of the month. If we move on to the next item, deadlines. I've already alluded to this when I spoke about being organized and planning. We say very easily yes to certain deadlines. Here's the thing. We are not brain surgeons. No one is going to die if we don't make a deadline. Is someone going to be upset? Of course, someone is going to be upset. However, if I manage it, then it can actually go pretty well. So I need to look at my deadlines. Are they reasonable? Are they manageable? And then I need to say no and move things out. Now, you all know the whole story about, you know, under-promising and over-delivering. I have a tendency when someone asks me to do something, I immediately in my mind work out as to when I can do it. And then I add 2 days, just in case something happens. And before they can say to me when they want it, I go and I'm like, would it be okay if I deliver on this and this and this date? And 9 out of 10 times they say yes. Now, because I've built in a buffer, I normally deliver a day earlier than what they wanted stuff. And as a consequence, they think I'm a superhero. So use that under-promising and over-delivering technique to manage with deadlines. Next item, please. Celebrate successes. You know, One of my friends is a very keen Comrades marathon athlete. And I always ask him, how do you run 90 kilometers? Because something in my brain just can't get this 90 kilometer thing. And he said to me, round about 35 kilometers in is when people give up. Those that give up, that's normally when they give up. And the reason is that's when your body tells you you're doing something crazy. You know, muscles are aching, your head is sore, your gut is not all that well anymore. He says, but the people that work through that, they do two things, and that's why they finish the race. The first thing that they do is they keep their eyes on the prize. The second thing they do is they celebrate how far they have come. Now, let's just quickly do this practical in terms of teams. Next time when you have a team meeting and we want to talk about progress, don't start with what is outstanding. Start with what have we managed to complete. Celebrate the success and then focus on what is coming. Last item on this slide, please. Consider no meeting days. I recently worked with a smaller firm, and what they do is they have no meeting Mondays, which means they do not have any meetings on a Monday, no matter how important things are, because no one is going to die. So just a small tip for you to consider. So in summary, you can choose for stress to mess with you, or you can choose not to. It is a choice. There will be stress, but how you channel it is what will make you successful. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Zuleika. Wow, what a great presentation. I think we'll implement that out there, our work as well. We are now nearing the end of our program. Just to conclude, to the presented team, honestly, my sincere thanks. I really enjoyed the discussion about this vital segment of our profession. It has honestly been enriching, and I'm confident that everyone who attended today's event has taken away at least one valuable insight to implement in their practices as well as their daily functions. And before we officially close this event, I just want to highlight that we have one further event that is scheduled for next month. The date is on the slides, so do save the date in your diary until we have officially announced via registration via our communique or our LinkedIn page. Also, if you have not yet joined our various networks, the IRBA is on X, Facebook, and Instagram. And audience, on that note, on behalf of the IRBA team and I greet you until next time and wishing you a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you, people.